Hey, folks, it's Sam, and I'm here talking with Dr. Malini Iyer. She's going to be one of the speakers at the Next Generation of Vedic Astrology conference, and I'm going to talk to her today about her class on um, the least integrated aspect of self, relationships. Of course, this is very important. We're all kind of flailing around trying to interact with other people and know ourselves. And so Dr. Malini is going to really unfold that. And I've heard her talk about this before. She really knows what she's doing. So take us through it.
Thank you, Sam. I want to first start off by thanking you for actually giving us this platform, the Next Generation of Vedic Astrology Conference. It's so unique that all of us, five of us who have studied with you, and we constantly talk about these things amongst ourselves, are now coming together and sharing what we talk about with others and talking astrology at such a high level
Yeah.
with such depth, right?
Yeah.
And so thank you for creating this unique opportunity, and kudos to you. I've seen how much work has gone in putting this together, and I'm grateful, all students who are taking level 1, level 2 with Sam, keep at it, because someday you'll be here and you'll be one of us having
There
these
you go.
conversations. So thank you,
Yeah. And
Sam.
one day you'll be an expert like Dr. Malini here. So yeah, absolutely. I love it. And that's, to invite people in to hear the kind of conversations that we have, I think is really one of the best things about the conference, because it's such a great way to learn rather than just having me talk and listen. It's great because, it's you presenting in your voice, of course, but then, I can come in and sort of show some of it as well. So that's what we'll be doing here today. And so I think people really like this. So take us through this. What are you going to be talking about?
So my motivation to talk about relationships was several readings that I have done over and over again, and I have noticed, and some of them are repeat clients, I've noticed that most people, all of us, want to know three major things, right? Health, career, and relationships. And most people are there are so many blind spots with relationships, and a lot of us don't look at ourselves in relationships. And the first thing I'm going to talk about in relationships, the least integrated aspect of self, is the seventh house, which is the farthest away from the first house, right? And Alexis is going to first lead us into what the lagna is, what the ascendant is, what the first house is all about. But the least integrated aspect of self, the first house of ourselves, is what is directly opposite us. That's the seventh house. And we go about life, trying to fix other people, because these other people show up as mirrors to us, to what we are not seeing within us. And what we do is we take that mirror and we start to clean the mirror, instead of really looking deep within what's in us that is triggering, that gets triggered in relationships. And this applies to all relationships. It applies to not just romantic partners. In romantic partners, it gets the most concentrated, but it applies to every single relationship. As soon as there's a separation from self and the other, this whole principle gets activated. So whether it's your colleagues at work, your business partners, or even if you're in a grocery line talking to the cashier, that other seventh house gets activated. And understanding the seventh house and what we're trying to learn and integrate, it's like the snake eating its own tail kind of a thing. What you're trying to integrate and complete the cycle is extremely important. That's the first thing I'm going to cover in this presentation.
That's so valuable, because again, what people should understand here is, of course, Malini's going to be, of course, talking about relationships, but and she's also going to get to how to make relationships work, and masculine and feminine, and how to understand them. But the first emphasis is on ourself, because we're the most important part, because we're the common thread in all of our relationships. What they all have in common is us. Like she said at first, we're always trying to find some way to fix everybody. If everybody could just act the way I wanted them to, then all my relationships would be fine. Well, what about us? It's easier to change ourselves than it is to change everyone else. right? And so, or to change ourselves, but to understand ourselves. So really, that's where the relationship astrology really has to start, is what is us. And so approaching us from the least integrated portion, which is the seventh house, which is the thing that's hardest for us, is a great way is where we need to start with the relationships anyway. So that's a great way to see it.
Yes, Sam. And I remember like a few years ago, you were the one who said something that stuck with me forever, which is you said, when you are in a relationship, especially in a romantic relationship, you're not in love with the person. You're in love with your version in that relationship, which is you are the common factor in all your relationships. So conversely, if you're not in love with yourself, you can never love someone else. And so that's a very, this whole 1-7 axis, the first house and the seventh house axis, is so important because it highlights that whole dynamic between us and how we show up in relationships and what we expect from other people to give to us that we can't
Yeah,
give.
I think the way I said it, or the way I understand it, is that we're in love with the of what we hope the other person, how we hope the other person is going to make us feel, or
Yes,
some version of that. Like first we start to get a little bit of a feeling of that. It's like, first of all, we're in love with how they make us feel.
yes.
Like when we see someone who makes us feel a certain way, it's like, oh, we start to love that because we love ourselves a little bit more,
Hmm.
right? Because they're making us feel a certain way, so we love having that feeling that we're having. And then so we're staying in love. We're trying to keep making them make us feel the way we want to feel. So then
Yes,
we project like, how can I make them keep making me feel good?
yes, 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 yes. So we are just playing this game with others, right?
Yeah.
And so and then an important aspect of relationships, which is the second thing we're going to talk about, is the masculine feminine energy balance. So masculine feminine is not the same as male and female. These are abstract qualities within us. And gender is one of the deepest identities that is embedded in our psyche. And I'm talking purely about heterosexual couples, but even homosexuals have some inclination uh, towards being more masculine versus towards being feminine. So when you come in a relationship, a man is getting to know his feminine side, and a woman, which is purely heterosexual, is trying to get to know her masculine side. And you can see these in charts. You can see the masculine feminine energy balance in charts, and you can see how we are trying to work the inner man and inner woman within us. And there are several layers to it, which I have really learned from Sam, and this is all a part of 3D relationship astrology, the way I approach astrology, that first Sam taught us. So masculine feminine is one of the deepest things that we try to hash out in relationships. And we all are confused about certain masculine feminine qualities within us, right? The feminine quality of conditional versus unconditional love. We are all confused about it and how to act in relationships. Certain couples, certain women are bound to act like the mother in the relationship instead of having that conditional versus unconditional love balance. And then in men, right, there is just so much about being aggressive and being this macho man versus being this inspirational kind of figure. And there's again so much confusion about like being that fatherly figure who carries the vision for the relationship versus the one who really shoulders the responsibility. And these are important concepts that we can see through planets and how they evolve in our chart. Don't you say, Sam?
Yeah, that's so. Drawing those distinctions are so important, and particularly, because we so often hear what I noticed, and it's true. I definitely teach these things. The real difference in the qualities of love between the moon and Venus, they tend to just get thrown into a sort of bucket. Well, moon and Venus, they're all about love, love, love. It's very different because, again, like you say, the moon is like the same love that loves a child, but also that loves a dog, or that this unconditional love where we just give it, where we don't want anything in return. Whereas Venus, which is what romantic relationships benefit by, is conditional. It's very conditional. That's why romantic relationships are not about unconditional love. It doesn't feel good to be mommying your partner, and it doesn't feel good when the partner's trying to mommy you or daddy you. Some of that, we like to know that the person has unconditional love for us, but the thing that makes the relationships work, especially between adults, is the Venus energy. Two adults getting along and honoring each other's autonomy and all of that. So, and then also drawing out the Mars Jupiter is a really great distinction. That sort of sattvic, uplifting male presence is really what women are sort of falling in love with. That's what they're really imagining. They're imagining that kind of knight in shining armor man. Now they like the Mars man too, the sort of vital, courageous figure. But the one that they really fall in love with and trust is that Jupiter figure. The more, again, like the knight in shining armor is really kind of like Jupiter.
Yeah, that the distinction between the hot guy versus the guy I'll marry, and I'm sure men have that too, right? They have that hot woman that they would lust after, like that Mars kind of energy, that passion that they would go for.
Well, with the men, it's Venus. Men, they're very simple about Venus. They're just like, they want the woman to be Venus.
Yeah. And then women are complex that way because they would lust after this hot guy, which is very much like a Mars macho man kind of a guy. But eventually they want to marry somebody like a Jupiterian figure who's inspirational and whom they can look up to. So that's what, all these things is what will break up in the class. I'll also break up, and all of us will chip in, but we'll talk about three Virgo, which is a very important concept, which is very unique to Vedic astrology, and I've not heard this in Western astrology, wherein just based on the moon nakshatras, Sri Virgo tries to see whether the woman is in the receiving position. And anatomically it makes sense, but energetically too, the woman it's better for the relationship where the feminine partner, if it's a heterosexual or homosexual relationship, the more feminine partner needs to feel in the receiving role, like she's receiving the gaze of the man. And it's a very important concept. We look through case studies in the class. I have several of those already chalked out that will highlight these concepts and how highly functional relationships show this, and then dysfunctional relationships, how do you align those people?
Yeah, and the term Sri Dirg literally means distance to the woman, where you see that the most, like you say, high functioning is when that circuit is lined up, where the man is naturally in the initiating role. He has the confidence to initiate, and the woman reflects back what he initiates, and she feels comfortable to be in the receptive role, so because she enjoys being in the receptive role. Whereas in the reverse, it doesn't feel good when the woman feels like she has to do all the work and the man feels like she's always coming at him. That's a reversal. It's a total short circuit of the energy, and that principle is reaffirmed in many facets of Vedic astrology, and even in like Kama Sutra and Indian culture and the sun and the moon. It's actually a very normal principle that, especially in this modern age, we tend to think that we've graduated beyond these simplistic masculine and feminine ideas. We haven't, not even 1 inch. In fact, it's one of the reasons why relationships are so difficult now, is because of the gender roles getting mixed up. So that Sri Dirg is really important to teach and to learn. And you can see how much more valuable this is, rather than just looking at relationship astrology as a way to try to, get your man and keep him, or how to please your man with astrology, or whatever that, or, how to make every relationship work. Again, that's not really the goal. The goal is to understand what the energy is there. That's much more valuable than some goal, success. Again, knowledge brings success, but knowledge really comes from being educated, like Malini's doing here. So that's going to be really important, really, really valuable.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And uh, from Steve, we'll move forward with the next concept, which is synastry. And this is really overlaying the two charts or overlaying the two energies on top of each other, and then actually looking at what buttons get pushed, okay, what planets are pushing the other planets. And these can be triggers or these can be glues that really hold the relationship together. And, I have case studies that we'll go through in the class where you'll see where a lot of buttons get pushed, and you can see the couple constantly bickering or fighting for dominance over each other. Whereas there are certain really good, maybe one or two good points that act as glue and that help the couple, no matter how they are individually, but together they become very functional. So
Yeah, and the synastry is when you lay one chart on top of another, so you're literally seeing like the astral bodies, and again, like it's very active, like this energy that you just feel around the person, and sometimes it's a positive button, and you'd like to see more of that through the synastry. Sometimes it's the difficult buttons, but it's also glue. A lot of it is glue. That's why you tend to have a lot of relationships that are in your life, even though they're really intense. If people were to look at that astrologically, you would see it's this intense button, but it keeps you engaged often. But for most of our relationships, they can tend to be places where we have difficulty with the person.
definitely. So, like you can see, this is much more layered approach, which is so in depth of looking at relationship astrology, not just looking at two people coming together, but looking at yourself first, how you show up in relationships. And it's so much more deeper than just merely looking at Kuta scores, right? And I come from an Indian background, and there is this shorthand of doing compatibility, wherein they just look at, I'm sure many of you have heard, they look at how much you scored out of 36. And if you scored about 18, they say, oh, it's a good match or something. This is so much more layered. It gives you so much more insight into who you are, and then really approach relationships with much more awareness, because it's not just romantic relationship like Sam and I are talking about. It's about every single relationship that shows up in your life. So I
Yeah,
hope.
because you can see that chart. We were just talking about buttons and stuff. We could see, like I have Gemini and I have a whole bunch of planets in Gemini. So whenever I get around anybody, they're around a big Gemini button. I'm pushing, like, and all of us are like that. Like if you have a bunch of planets in, like Malini also has a bunch of planets in Gemini. So we kind of push that Gemini button in an enjoyable way. That's why like we enjoy talking and whatnot, because we got a lot of that energy there, right?
Mhm.
Um, but some like where you have some difficult energy, like I have Saturn in Capricorn. So people have planets in Capricorn. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but that energy then is right on this energy of mine. So I'm pushing a kind of Capricorn button. I'm also pushing like a Leo button because I have Mars there. So again, you see this over time. Like I've noticed so many times, anyone who has, especially a benefic planet in Leo, like if they have the moon in Leo, Venus in Leo, Mercury in Leo, often, or Rahu or Ketu in Leo or something, it could be very intense because I have Mars there. Mars is like ready to not fight necessarily, but it's very, where those opinions come out and it'll hit someone a certain way.
Mhm.
So it's something, this is part of the life lesson to learn about these buttons. So it's why it's such an important thing, because you're walking around as a kind of collection of buttons and you're
Yeah.
trying to make everybody kind of adapt to your buttons. That's what you're doing in your life. That's what the chart is showing, how you're going through trying to get everybody to adapt to you based on that.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember the last time we had this conversation, Sam had brought up about like so many people in India, right? And how, because there are billion people, 1.3 billion people, you're bound to have some of your buttons pushed. And these are not romantic partners, these are just strangers, maybe on a train or in a bus or in a rickshaw, or just some stranger walking on the street. And they push these buttons, but they push these buttons because you have them within you, and that tells you something about who you are and why that button is getting pushed. So it's
Yeah.
important to understand that.
So, well, as you can see, we could talk about this. We love talking about astrology already about 20 minutes. So these are like 15, 10 to 15 minutes, and they've all gone over a little bit because we like talking about it. So, again, we hope that you show up for the conference. You'll get many classes like this, and this is going to be fantastic. Dr. Malini Iyer breaking this out. Really, thank you, Malini, for coming on and talking here, giving us an overview, and we look forward to having you present on the least integrated aspect of self at the Next Generation Conference.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for this opportunity.